You're staying with Snoop,
Yeah.
and you said he's living in Venice?
Yeah, we were living in Venice, and we're living, and how our apartments were, we had the top row, and our apartments, Snoop lived in the first half of the apartments. I lived in like number 3, so he had like 1 and 2, and I had the third apartment. So we were connected.
A day comes. I guess probably seemed like a normal day. You guys were going to the studio?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, well, I'd like to make a disclaimer for everybody that's watching that let them know we're being responsible and that you and Snoop have both been acquitted.
Definitely.
Of what we're talking about. Yes. And that, under the laws, you can never be prosecuted or brought to trial again for this. I just like to make that announcement so people know.
And I second the disclaimer, whatever you said. Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, let me know. What all happened?
Yeah. Well, you want to take a break for a second?
Sure. Yeah, we can take a break.
Just a couple seconds. A lot of things that happen, the media, they didn't tell you the truth. And they tried to paint this picture, right, of me and Snoop to be something that we weren't. And when I tell you this story, you're going to find out that it was about Snoop, but it really wasn't about Snoop because they knew the truth. And then they chose not to tell the truth and still try to prosecute us. When I tell you these things, you're also going to find out not only did I do my job and unfortunately somebody died, but I told the truth from the very beginning. And I don't think that people really knew that. No one really knows that I was told by Detective Anguiliano, if I'm saying his name right, that I was too detailed and too articulate, that I must be lying. So I'm going to tell you really what happened. So when you get this, it's coming from me. It's not coming from a book. It's not coming from hearsay. It's really coming from somebody who really went through it, lived it, and live it daily because of who I am and the mantle that I have to carry. So when I tell you this story, not only is it real and genuine, but it's so raw. And you have to keep in mind that there's a family involved, and there's a family that lost somebody. I don't glorify that. I don't like talking about that. If I had the finances and if I had the money, if I had the things that I really want to have, I would continuously try to reach out to the family and try to help them and try to love them and try to show them really what we're supposed to be like as a people, right? But I know that will never happen because they won't accept me like that because of what they think. So anybody that's really been through something like this, they wouldn't glorify it. They wouldn't try to magnify the fact that somebody died, right? So I'm going to tell you the story.
It sounds horrible. I mean, from beginning to end, it sounds like they did everything they could to try to destroy you guys. I can only imagine what you guys went through. So the day comes, you're at Snoop's house or his apartment, and you hear a commotion. And you guys go outside. What happens next?
Yeah. Just like any other day, we're on our way to the studio. We have to be at the studio by 12 o'clock. That's our time, that's our recording time. And on that particular day, we heard some commotion downstairs. I didn't really know what to make of it because my job is Snoop, right? It's not the pound, it's not the dog pound, but it's my family. We all still together, but my job was Snoop. And so every day they would wait for us downstairs by the Jeep, and we would take off and we would go. So on this particular day, we heard some commotion downstairs. And I'm thinking, well, I know Snoop didn't go downstairs without me. I mean, what? So I heard some drama. And so immediately I grab my gun and I'm getting downstairs because I heard some drama. But as I'm going down the stairs, Snoop is like behind me, right? So I stop at the end of the stairs, and when I get to, it's like the little bridgeway, I see a guy leaning out of a car. He can't see me, and he's just barking back and forth with one of the guys, and it was I can't really remember exactly what he looked like, but I just saw the light-skinned face, right? And then I saw a gun come out of the window. So at that time, there was no threat. You know, Snoop was right here. It wasn't anything. It was just real quick. You know, so I immediately take off and I get Snoop upstairs. So we rush him upstairs. I'm trying to calm everybody down. The situation was diffused. So now it's time to, you know, we got to get back to the studio, actually get to the studio. And so as we get in the truck and we start going down the road, somebody hit, hey man, we forgot the DAT player. I'm like, we forgot the DAT player. The DAT player at the time was a recording device that we were using to record the music on the hard drive. It was all the music was held on the DAT player.
Who's driving?
At the time, it was Snoop.
Snoop driving?
And it was Snoop, me, and Sean Abrams that were in the car. Okay. And so we're on our way back, and actually we take off and we start going on the strip, and he's like, man, we got to get the DAT player. And he's like, oh. So we turn back around. But as we're coming down the road, we see somebody in the middle of the street kind of flagging us down. And I remember the guy leaning out of the back seat, but I remember the front seat dude, he was like a heavy-set guy. He had a heavy-set face, you know, so I remember that. It was a quick scan. I remember that face and the guy. And so he's flagging us down the middle of the street, so Snoop kind of pulls over. He's like, hey, man, I'm sorry, dog. It's my fault. It's my fault. Man, I remember him saying he just didn't take his medicine. He was tripping. I'm sorry. I remember that to this day. He didn't take his medicine. We'll come to find out that he was diabetic, right? And then, unfortunately, sometimes now that I know that with the diabetes and possibly drinking and all these other things, you become agitated and you do other things, right? And after all of this, I realized that may have prompted him to the things that he did and why he reached and all that. I don't know. I'm looking for answers myself. But we pulled over, and at the time, my gun, I pulled off. When he had pulled over and Snoop pulled over, I take my gun and I set it on my lap. And Snoop was in the driver's seat, and now I'm looking to my right because the guy is backing up, and as he's backing up, I have my gun on my lap. He's backing all the way up to the cement, and there's a slight incline on the hill, and he kept backing up and backing up, backing up. So now he's approximately, I'd say, 15, 20 feet away from me because we pulled over to the curb. We weren't parked curbside. I'd say we're maybe like a foot and a half, 2 feet away from the curb. So he's backing up. He's like, oh man, no, he be tripping sometimes. Man, we know you are, man. It's my fault. I'm sorry. And all of a sudden, the bushes flutter, and you see somebody run out of the bushes, and it was Philip Walter Merriam at the time. He runs and he tries to, he gets to his guy. His guy grabs him. It's like, man, no. He pushes him away. But when he pushes, he lifts his shirt and he reaches. But soon, when I saw him start to reach, that's when I took my gun and I fired. Now, you have to remember now, like I told you, there was like a little incline. My hope, I wanted to hit him in the lower part of his body. So as I'm aiming, he's turning. And as I'm aiming here, I fire, pow, 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 pow. At the same time, it's exactly consistent with what I said. When he was turning, he got hit in the hip and in the shoulder blade. And unfortunately, the one that went through his hip went through him and his shoulder. He takes off and he runs. We find out that when he ran, he dropped about, I don't know what they said, it was 50 yards or 75 yards away. He dropped right there. And that's unfortunately where he died. But his friends took the gun. Now, when his friends took the gun, when the police got there, there was no gun, right? So when we turned ourselves in, we didn't get arrested. We did not get arrested.
Did you guys take off from the scene?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is Snoop saying at this time?
Snoop is not saying he's cool. He's panicking a little bit, but he's cool. He's panicking a little bit. He's cool. He's like, I'm looking to make sure that he's good first because I remember when I fired, I remember hitting him. Just all I wanted to do was hit him. He bellied over because I meant it. All I wanted to do was get him out of line of fire. So I can't even react it now, but I remember here, pow, and he had to have gone down. And I immediately went here, pow, 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 like that.
Do you know how many times you fired?
I fired 6 shots.
You guys take off
We did.
and go to a payphone?
No, we called at the time. We had cell phones.
Cell phones.
They were back then. Make you try and be funny. No, they had cell phones, and we immediately called our attorney.
Told them what happened.
Yeah, we did. Told them what happened, and they, at the time, they were in Miami, so they caught a red eye that night, and they flew back immediately. So it was probably the next day, the next morning is when we went in to turn ourselves in. They did not arrest us.
Well, you guys were on the run for a week because Snoop ended up going to the award show.
Snoop did. After we made the call, we had to wait for our attorneys to get. So the next day they came, and that's when we were going to turn ourselves in. We didn't turn ourselves in the next day. We had to wait. So we waited until everything was calmed down. Snoop was at the American Music Awards, and they came to arrest him. I wasn't. So I had to wait until everything died down, and that's when we decided that it was the best that we do. But the police had already known what was going on because we said that we were going to turn ourselves in. We were waiting for David Kenner and our attorney to get back and everything to be done, and then we would turn ourselves in.
You're leaving, and where do you guys go from there?
I went to a hotel. I went to a hotel, and I contacted Suge to let him know where I was. And at first he didn't know. It took a minute, because you have to understand, man, the drama and the detriment of really what just happened. So I called Suge and let them know where I was, and Suge came and got me, and he waited for David Kenner, and at the time we haven't retained Johnny Cochran at the time, but we waited, for David to get the other attorney, and we went in and turned ourselves in. I turned myself in, and Snoop had came at a later time, because I was a trigger man, so I went and with my attorney and turned myself in.
At what point did you find out that he actually died?
That night.
That night?
That night. Yeah, well, let me go back. That night I heard that he had died. I didn't hear the confirmation. I heard that he died. And then when it was really confirmed, then it really hit me.